3.3 Dissemination. I'm Rachel Alloway, the presenter for this recording. We can look at science as progressing through what Isaac Newton called standing on the shoulders of giants, that we progressively build on the work of others and we advance and challenge and move science forward through those acts of building and constructing around previous ideas and projects. Indeed, we might ask whether any idea or finding from research or any other scholarly form of inquiry that is not shared or disseminated has any real value. Indeed, not only is it an issue that the opportunity to advance science has been missed, but also that the work of others and the participants in research has not necessarily been properly honoured or respected. So there's a strong case to make that communicating the ideas and findings from scholarly work, that reporting on studies and creating and advancing theories and frameworks is a fundamental responsibility and not just an optional extra as part of a scholarly project. Now, when we think about scholarly communication, we need to think about a number of dimensions for that. Clearly, somebody has to create the work, but that's not the end in it. It's not just enough to write a report or a paper or give a presentation. There needs to be an evaluative step, whether that's peer review or something else, but there needs to be some sense that the quality of the work has been assessed. There is an act of dissemination in terms of how the material gets out there, in terms of publishing or presenting. And there's also a sense of preservation. It's not just enough to present, but there is a sense that this has some sort of permanency. Even a presentation, it will be noted within the conference guide and so on. Scholarly communication can have both formal and informal channels, and it should be seen as a whole as part of a public good, something that facilitates inquiry knowledge for mankind as a whole. Now that may seem like a very lofty ideal, but scholarship is a serious undertaking, and it's important to understand the work that we do within that lens. Now we can think about a number of dimensions of reporting. The first one is to provide a simple report, essentially a textual or a text plus diagrams description of what you did and what you found. There may be a number of audiences for these kinds of reports, largely in the process of accounting, maybe within your department, very likely to the Research Ethics Board. Your funders may require some kind of report and so on. Certainly it's important to provide a report for the direct stakeholders in the research, particularly if it's an evaluation or an innovation project. The decision makers, whether it's going to be continued or what decisions might be made on the basis of what's found, need to have those reports. Indeed, it may be the primary communication mechanism for evaluation or innovation projects. And it's no less scholarly for being a report, but it is from a different audience and it has a different level of review or accountability to other alternatives. So what alternatives are there? Well, you can give a presentation performed at a meeting that might be internal, such as a grand rounds or a teaching rounds or a departmental retreat. Or it may be external in the sense that it's given at a conference or a symposium, a colloquium, and so on. It may be given as an oral presentation, usually as a short communication, often collected in blocks around similar themes. It may be given as a poster, which is no less respectable, which gives you a single visual presentation of your work, although there sometimes may be an opportunity to accompany it with a short oral presentation or to take questions around the poster. And there's also the opportunity to present your work through a workshop. It gives you a longer format, but needs to be a lot less didactic and a lot more hands-on in terms of getting participants to actively engage and do the kinds of things that you've been finding and not just to tell them about it. There may also be publications generated from your work, and by publications I mean articles, papers, and so on. And there are lots of different kinds of publications that you can have. Some may be peer-reviewed, some may not. They may be research reports, there may be conceptual theoretical papers, there may be reports from evaluations, there might be review of existing literature or a synthesis of the literature, such as a systematic or a scoping review. There may be an opinion piece, an editorial, or even a letter to the journal about the work, your work or somebody else's, all of which are good scholarly communications. There may be many different venues for doing these kinds of publications. You may publish in medical education journals, But you can also often publish educational work in medical journals. Certainly, education into a particular specialty can often be published in the journals for that specialty. You can also publish in education journals that are not necessarily in any way health related. Or you can even publish in, say, book chapters. There are many different venues for that kind of written publication about your work. Now, in terms of getting the work out there, the gold standard in terms of the evaluative component is some sense of peer review. That is, that peers, people like you, the researchers and scholars in your field, have a look at it, read it, consider it, appraise it, and give some kind of a sense of whether or not it needs to be changed or actually falls below a standard to be published. Sometimes things get peer reviewed and they are accepted absolutely as is, but that's relatively rare. Now, although it is a gold standard in the sense that it gives the community that you work in some opportunity to have feedback on your work, there are many limitations and drawbacks to this as well. For instance, there may be limited expertise specifically in your area, or there may be limited expertise in how to conduct reviews. If you've ever published papers, I'm sure you've experienced that sometimes the peer review process can be quite patchy. Some reviews are sparklingly brilliant and helpful, others are rather less so. Individuals may have biases, they may have conflicted interests, they may have insufficient time or focus to give you a good review, and there may be issues over whether or not your work may be good in general but may not fit to the journal. So although it's a really good thing to have your work peer reviewed, and my work has benefited significantly from the peer review of my peers, it's not always necessarily the best thing you can have, and it's always important to have an understanding of the quality of what peer review looks like. It's also challenging that rejection rates for journals are generally increasing. More people are publishing, and although the journals may expand their issues to somewhat, there's almost always a significant competition to get a slot within a journal. And some journals are less than 20% of the papers accepted, such as academic medicine. So that there is a real issue of normalization in terms of what the journals are prepared and able to publish. And sometimes I would suggest a drift towards conservatism over what is acceptable given the alternatives that might be out there. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't be creative and imaginative in the way that you undertake your scholarly writing, but it's to understand that it's an competitive environment and that peer review is a process that can both exclude as well as quality improve to include your work in the literature base. Carl Sagan, talking about peer-reviewed publications, said, well, why do we put up with it? Do we like to be criticised? Well, no scientist enjoys that. Every scientist feels a proprietary affection for his or her ideas and findings. But even so, the hard but just rule is that if the ideas don't work, you must throw them away. And that's a sage understanding about the nature of peer review in terms of improving your work, both in terms of proving what you did, but also how you're reporting it. And therefore, peer review is a key component to that. Now, there are standards in how you report. If you might remember, one of the early presentations for Sheri talked about GLASIC standards for scholarly communication. It should have clear goals, adequate preparation, appropriate methods, significant results, effective presentation, and a sense of reflective critique. Those stand for any kind of scholarly dissemination. Any publication, presentation, report you give should still respond to those criteria. On and above those, there are also specific reporting standards for different kinds of studies. For instance, there's the CONSORT framework for reporting randomized controlled trials and the PRISMA framework for reporting systematic reviews. And it's worth looking to see whether the kind of study that you've done has a standard, or at least a set of standards for reporting that kind of work. Now, in terms of why we publish, well, there are social and scientific benefits for publishing our work in terms of improving practice and thinking, about helping, guiding, and inspiring others. Sometimes it's important to shape or direct the way that a particular topic is discussed, what we call the discourse around it, and particularly about either creating or challenging the dominance and direction of the ideas and theories that support that discourse. There will be more practical benefits in terms of your career, in terms of promotion. That's terrible saying you'll publish or perish, but it does actually make a lot of sense. And it's also about developing and enhancing the capability and capacity for doing scholarly work, in the sense that practice certainly makes perfect, so it helps you to get better, but also creates a better profile for you. And indeed, those reputational benefits are not just for moving your career forward, but they also pertain to the institution and to the national sense of what the kind of work, for instance, in Canada, and for the communities of practice within which you work. So in summary, disseminating your ideas, your scholarly work, is a fundamental scholarly responsibility, that you should embrace a structured inquiry that follows Glassex's criteria. There are many options for publishing, and there are different consequences and options that go with each. And OHMS is here to provide consults and support for you in any way that you want to engage dissemination activities as part of your scholarly work. Thank you very much for engaging in this presentation, and we hope that you'll continue to do good scholarly work. We look forward to seeing you in Sheri.